Sand is amazing. And the most amazing thing about sand is that so few people know quite how beautiful it is. Since I left art college 20 years ago, I've had a colourful array of careers in design, entertainment, and latterly technology. And last year, relieved that my latest business was finally on its feet, I decided it was time to take a break and have a complete change in direction. And I am now a sand gazer, which means that I look at sand quite a lot. Now, most people think that sand is boring, brown, dusty stuff, maybe with bits of glass in it, a bit of a nuisance if it gets in your sandwiches on holiday, but they probably don't give it much thought than that. At least I didn't until several months ago. But actually sand, under a microscope, can look like this. Has anybody been to Menorca? This is sand from Menorca. This is Spanish sand. It varies wherever you go around the world. This is sand from the Philippines. And this is sand from the island of Crete in Greece. Sand has quite literally changed my whole life. And this is how it happened. With all the things that go ding and ping and emails and Facebook and texts and Twitter, it's just increasingly difficult, don't you think, to just relax and focus, unwind. I was exhausted. I'd been on a roller coaster ride trying to launch a technology business in an economic downturn. And I was rushing about the rat race with a briefcase and the most enormous pair of blinkers on. And I needed to find a way to stop, and not just stop, but slow down and have a complete change of direction. I needed to do something for the artistic side of myself that I'd neglected for too many years. I wanted to be an artist again. But somehow, somewhere between art college and the rat race, I had kind of lost my way. So I'm a bit of a list maker. And I decided to make a list of things that make me truly happy, to see if I could get life in perspective again. And when I say truly happy, I mean truly deeply happy. So I had lots of things on this list to start with, and after I stripped away the obvious things like spending time with loved ones, I stripped away all the other things that give me like quick bursts of pleasure, like dark chocolate with sea salt and dancing in the kitchen. And after I'd taken all those things away, I was left with some incredibly simple things, like just staring at flames. Who doesn't like a log fire, a beach fire, a campfire? Who doesn't like a sunrise, a sunset, beautiful still water, doing skimmers? Beach combing for hours, just collecting shells and pebbles, and looking at the clouds. And that gorgeous feeling when you're just staring out of an aeroplane window and you're looking at the clouds and the land below, and it's times like that, I think you just really get life in perspective and you get a real bird's eye view on your life. And when I'd done this list, I realized two things. First of all, I like staring at things a lot, especially the elements, fire, earth and water. That was the common denominator with all those things. And secondly, I realized that when I stare at things a lot that I love, I'm very relaxed, I'm very absorbed. And it makes me happy. And I also realized that that's when time flies, completely whizzes by. It's dinner time before I've even had my lunch. I loved biology at school. I loved staring down the microscope. It's that staring thing again. But it was the patterns that I loved. It was the fractals. So I could stare for hours, but I wasn't a textbook student. I think I just perceived things differently. And labels don't interest me. So if I was looking down a microscope, for example, at cross-section of a plant root, I wouldn't see the epidermis and the xylem and the phloem. I would see this amazing mesh of turquoise and purple and navy, and it looked like it had been crocheted. If I was looking at some onion cells, I would see amazing sort of glassy paddy fields, and I wanted to stay in my lunch break and do a collage of it, and I was told to give up biology, and I was told to take the microscope to the art room, which actually was really good advice. And it was remembering this love of microscopes that I did a Google image search several months ago on microscopic images. And I came across this image of some grains of sand by Dr. Gary Greenberg, my hero in Hawaii. I was amazed. I had no idea that sand looked like this, and we're surrounded by it. Not only is it on beaches, it's in concrete. It's in between bricks, it's in mortar, it's in glass. We're surrounded by it. If I'd have known, I was brought up in the 1970s and 1980s in Doha and the Emirates, and if I'd known when I was doing my homework on the beach and sledging down sand dunes on the upside down coffee table, that I was surrounded by this. And then there was this next image of a single grain of sand. And those little lines that you can see there are tunnels. They're tunnels that are made by microscopic worms. So basically, that one grain of sand is a planet to some microscopic worms. Sand started blowing my mind, and I wanted to explore, and I wanted to look more closely for myself. So I needed a space, and I found a space, a tiny space. It was actually earmarked to be a broom cupboard, and it was in a lovely shared building. And I saw it as the perfect place to have my metamorphosis and to unravel those briefcase years. So I went around about creating a space. I turned one half of it into a little laboratory, the other half into a cozy little art studio. And the next thing I did, I put a message on Facebook and I said, can anybody send me sand? Does anybody live near a beach? Can you send me some sand? And then before I knew it, all of this lot started flooding in from all over the world. And I've now got a mini Pangea happening in my magical broom cupboard, as specimens of countries have come flooding in from around the world and are now side by side. And it's quite wonderful. And what's also really wonderful is when I'm in that little space and I'm looking down my microscope and I'm rummaging through sand and I've got my candles lit, my harp music on, and I'm eating my dark chocolate with sea salt, and I'm rummaging through and I'm finding the more beautiful grains to photograph, and I'm looking through, and I might be using an acupuncture needle, or sometimes I use an eyelash glued onto a wooden stick with a bit of beeswax. And when I'm rummaging through, hours pass. And sometimes I miss my lunch and my dinner. And the reason is, I'm happy because I'm absorbed and because I found something that I am passionately curious about. But it's not all rosy in Sandland. it can be an infuriating occupation. I can spend an entire morning looking for 2 beautiful grains of sand to photograph, and then a gust of wind, a big sneeze, I blow out a candle and they've gone. I once found this beautiful grain of sand. It looked like a glass flying saucer. It had a grey flower in the middle. It had purple coils that spiraled out from it. I was trying to get it onto a slide, and it pinged off into outer space as if it had a mind of its own. And some of my favourite grains, I think I've inhaled. It dawned on me that the biggest difference between being an artist and working in the business world is one letter. The business world is all about the plan. It's all deadlines and outcomes and targets and strategies, and there's not enough play. And play is important. Even Albert Einstein said, play is the highest form of research. And anyone can play with microscopes. You don't have to be a scientist or a photographer or an artist or a geologist. You don't even need to know what you're looking at. You just have to experiment and explore and have fun. And then you just learn as you go. And I'm now learning microscopy and macrophotography. And in fact, a few weeks ago, I invested in a couple of microscopes through which I can actually take photographs of my own grains of sand. So I'm finally getting images of my own. And this one, I think, looks like a kind of Dr. Seuss character. Okay, I'm going to tell you something now. I haven't a clue what I'm looking at. But for the scientists in the room, apparently, sand originates from 3 sources: rocks, organisms, and minerals. But for me, I'm looking at these as an artist, so these to me are just objects of beauty. And it's amazing because wherever you go around the world, sand varies. This is from Copacabana and was as tiny as the tiniest speck you could imagine. This little icicle thing is from South Africa. This is from Scotland, so you don't have to go far. You never know where the fabulous grains are going to come from. This one is from Greece, and this one's from France. Greece again. It's from Spain. And these next ones are from the Gulf of Mexico. This one's a bit of a favourite of mine so far, but I've not been doing it very long. It looks like, to me, a grain of sand suspended in a kind of transparent, microscopic seashell. It was so tiny, it was like a pinhead. What I'm trying to do with my photography is keep everything really pure. So, to try and sort of counteract all that technology and everything, I'm not using any post-production processes. I'm not using Photoshop or anything like that. All I've done here is I've suspended that grain of sand in a droplet of water, and I've lit it by candlelight. And the most exciting thing of being a sand gazer, is that when you're waiting for the image to be revealed, and it might take 30 seconds because I have to use a really slow shutter speed, and you're waiting and you never know quite how it's going to come out. And sometimes it's just nothing. Most of the time it's nothing or something very disappointing. And every so often you just get something like this, which just kind of takes my breath away. This one brought a tear to my eye, actually. But I can't take credit for these images because this is simply fire, earth, and water doing the work. Some people said that they thought I'd get bored of looking at sand after a little while. But it's not just the grains that you can look at if you're a sand gazer. There's so many other amazing aspects to sand. I mean, for example, the colours that you get are astonishing. the patterns that you get, the wind makes patterns, water makes patterns, and what I love here is that, don't they just look like little river deltas? You know, and that fascinates me when these tiny things can look like, the aerial view can look like the close-up. And then there's patterns that plants can make, and animals, and tiny little creatures, and great big creatures, and even sound. This is called cymatics. If you play different frequencies of sound to sand, you get different geometric patterns. And the higher the frequency, the higher the note, the more intricate the pattern. And not only does every grain of sand have a story, every sample that comes back, that flies in through my letterbox, has a story. And I've traded sand for gifts with long-lost friends. And I've used sand as a kind of currency. I've even traded sand for sand. In fact, I've just swapped a spoonful of Norfolk and a spoonful of Suffolk for a spoonful of Ukraine and Russia with a lovely lady, Carla, in the Netherlands. And my new friend Herman in Germany claims to have the largest sand collection in the world, 40,000 samples. And he's just very kindly sent me a copy of the Sand Journal. Yes, there really is such a magazine. But every so often, I stop and I just think, where am I going with all this sand gazing? But to be honest, it doesn't matter. I've got ideas, and I'm open to ideas. And I just think that when you find something that you're truly happy with, and you know you're facing in the right direction, just keep on walking. Just go with the flow. And I haven't got any strategies or any targets or any deadlines, and I'm actually really excited that I don't know what the outcome's going to be. But what I do know is that I am an artist again. And those blinkers are off, and I've eBayed the briefcase. And all that's left to say, apart from everybody, please go and buy a microscope. And also, if you're ever on an aeroplane, please get a window seat. All that's left to say is we need to enjoy our precious time on this wonderful planet as much as we can. And to do that, we need to just stop every so often and think about what makes us truly, deeply happy. Remember those things. And then go and do more of whatever that is. And also, more than ever, we need to find balance. And we need to step away more from the screens of our mobile phones and our televisions and our computers. And we need to just look at these miracles that are silently happening all around us in nature. And W.B. Yeats said, "Life is full of magical things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." And so many people are stargazing and looking up or traveling miles to explore, and they're forgetting, they're not realizing maybe, that there's this wonderful, enormous, spectacular spectrum of life right under their noses. And if brown, dusty old sand is actually amazing, what else might we be missing?